Hi, Com658. We're going to talk about Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic. Um, Jenna and Jessica talked about the first two sections. I'm going to talk about the last section, last two sections, Trust and Divinity. She talks a lot about trusting yourself, and not agonizing over what you're doing. She said there's this myth of like the tormented artist that you must be in pain while you're creating something, or it's not good, or it's not worthy. And there's a myth that, addiction creates this spark of inspiration and helps people write or create things. And that's just not true. She says, just because Ernest Hemingway was an alcoholic and a great writer doesn't mean that the alcoholism created the great writing that he did. Anyone who has that kind of issue, and they're a great writer or a great artist, they are that despite the issue. It has nothing to do with their inspiration created by drugs or alcohol or depression or whatever it may be. She even says, like when she's depressed, she can't create anything. She feels overwhelmed. She can't do anything. So don't feel like the process has to be so tormenting and so difficult. It is difficult. It is hard, but that doesn't mean it's not, that you can't have fun while you're doing it, or you can't do something you enjoy and make it turn out awesome. So she says, trust that your work loves you as much as you love it. She even talks about, she talked to young writers and she asked them that question. She said, do you love writing? And of course they were like, yes. And they said, do you think writing loves you back? And they were, no. Couldn't believe she asked that question. No, it's hard. It's hurts, to create something, to write something. And she said, you need to think that what you're creating loves you back like you love it, and that what you are creating needs to be created, and it needs to be created by you, because there's no one else that's going to do it the way that you will do it. So she talks about the martyr process, like martyr versus trickster, that we think of ourselves as martyrs. Like if you have to be serious about it, you have to be hard on yourself and self-disciplined and all of that thing, or it's not good, it's not right, it's not the way you should do it. And, where tricksters can create something and have fun. I mean, she uses the example, she says, like, martyrs are like Sir Thomas More, tricksters are like Bugs Bunny. So it's a really cute dynamic that she talks about. She tells a lot of great stories in this book, so I can't tell them all, but she does say, instead of following your passion, which is very overwhelming and intimidating, she said, find something you're curious about and follow that. And your curiosity will lead you to things you might not ever realize. A few years ago, she was having problems finding the next topic of a book. She was, she wanted to write another book and she was having trouble. So she focused on something else. And she talks about a lot of different people who've done that went and painted bicycles instead of writing their next play, and that led them to, writing about painting children's bicycles. So she says the book that she ultimately wrote, she decided, she had just moved to a new house and she wanted to plant a garden. And her mother had always had a garden, and she had always avoided learning anything about gardening because she did not like it, did not think it was interesting. And she decided instead of planting a vegetable garden, she was going to plant a flower garden. And then she realized that she had learned much more from her mother than she thought. But as she was planting the flowers, she started to get interested in each flower and the history of that flower, where that flower came from. And, most of them were not local to New Jersey. They were from Japan. They were brought over from Japan. They were brought over from Holland or Turkey. So she started researching that, and she did some traveling even to do research on that. And she ended up writing a book about 19th century botanists. And it was called The Signature of All Things. And it was a great book. And she said, I would have never come to that book. I would have never thought to write a book like that. So, your curiosity leads you to things. She also has this great story about, she said that a stranger told her the story at a party, but she'll never forget it. And she doesn't remember anyone's name, so she said this guy was talking about his younger brother who was, and she calls him little brother because she didn't know his name, who had gone to France to be an artist, and he was spending all his time painting and trying to be very inspired, living very poorly. And one day he was at a cafe and he met this group of people who turned out to be like French aristocrats, and they had a great talk. And they said, "Come to our party. We're having a great party. It's a masquerade ball, and everyone makes great costumes and spares no expense, and it's going to be the party of the year." And so he's like, all right, he was having trouble painting and then find something to paint. So he put all his effort into creating a costume for this masquerade ball. And he got, really into it, went and bought fabric, sewed, painted his face, and all this stuff, rented a car, drove to the country where this party was. And he walked into the masquerade ball, and everyone else it was like a Renaissance style party. So everyone else was wearing those kind of costumes and masks over their face and everything. It was very fancy. And he had made a lobster costume. So he decided, I did this. This is me. He walked into the party. He walked to the middle of the dance floor. Everyone stopped. The music stopped. Everyone looked at him. And they were like, "What are you supposed to be?" And he was like, "I'm the court lobster." And so then everybody laughed and they had a great time and they danced like a lobster with the rest of the people that night and had a great time. So, don't ever be afraid because you could go to the party and be the lobster and be the life of the party, or you could go to the party and maybe people didn't accept it the way you wanted to, but stand in the corner and dance by yourself. I mean, just it was great. So yeah, she talks about that. I thought that was a great story. I'm going to tell that story to everyone I know. And then she talks about divinity a little bit, about how in Bali, if you ever seen or read Eat, Pray, Love, she talks about Katut who was the Balinese medicine man that told her a story about how there are these temple dances that are very sacred that they used to do in the temples, but it was really hard to get tourists to come to the dark, serious temple to see the dancers. So they decided to go to the tourists. And so they left the temples and, and it's a great honor to be a dancer and this kind of dancing. So they would go to the resorts and they would dance for tourists in front of swimming pools or whatever, and then they would get paid. They made more money. They got more exposure. People got to see them do it. And they said, but these high-minded Westerners, probably Americans, were like, but how shameful, and it's, that you are taking this sacred thing and you're doing it in a resort. And they were like, why is that a bad thing? Why do you think that these people who are swimming in the pool or drinking Mai Tais can't enjoy this sacred dancing? So they spun it around, and they don't have a word for sacrilege in their language. They didn't understand what the big deal was. So there's also that feeling of there is nothing sacred. And I mean that in a good way, but I mean, there's nothing so sacred that you can't do it yourself, that, someone has to be, divinely righted to create that novel that you want to write and that kind of thing. So anyway, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I think we should all think about what our curiosity is and not our passion. And I want to ask you guys if you've ever been the lobster at the party, and what is your curiosity? And I think that's sort of what we're all doing with our creativity connection project, is following our curiosity. So anyway, I am on a cruise, but I will see you guys next time, and I miss you guys. Have a good class. Talk to you later.